All right, well, I'll just state for the record then
Okay.
that my name is Michelle Marino, and I'm here interviewing Earline Rogers, and today is Monday, October 29th, I believe, 2018, and we are at her home in Gary, Indiana. So I'll just go ahead and get started with some easy questions of when and where were you born?
Born right here in Gary, Indiana.
Okay, and when?
Oh, 1934, December 20th.
Okay, 1934. What were your parents' names?
My dad was Earl Smith, and my mother's name was Robbie Smith.
Okay, what was her maiden name?
Her maiden name was Hicks.
Hicks. Okay. And were they from Gary originally, or where are they from?
No, my dad was from Tennessee, and my mom was from Georgia.
Okay. Well, how'd they end up in Indiana?
Looking for jobs.
Okay.
The steel mills. My dad and my mom came here. Their parents came looking for work.
Okay.
But my dad went to school here, and so did my mom. And
Okay.
then my dad went ahead and worked in the steel mill for some years.
So their parents brought them when they were young
Yes,
kids here.
right.
Okay. Now, did they know each other like in high school or working in the mills or?
They knew each other right after high school.
Okay.
I think my dad had graduated from high school, and my mom was living in his mother's home. He was away in college. And when he came home, his mother was sick, and so he had to leave college, come home to take care of his mom, and that's how they met.
Okay. So she was boarding in the house?
Yes,
or? Okay, that's interesting. So you said your dad then took work in the steel
mills, yes.
What did your mother do?
My mother never worked. She was a homemaker.
Homemaker, okay. And do you have any siblings?
Yes. I had 3 brothers. I only have one now that's alive, and then I have one sister
Okay.
who's right next door.
Oh, wow. Didn't move too far apart.
No,
Where were you in the order of your...
I was second.
Second.
I have an older brother, yes.
Okay, all right. How would you describe your childhood?
Fairly normal. I grew up in a housing project. Had just been built here in Gary. And so we stayed there until my dad got to a point where he was making more than enough money. And so then he bought a home. And I think I was probably in middle school when we moved to another location. And so I went to the schools here, graduated from Gary Roosevelt. So fairly, just a plain kind of a childhood. Mom and dad worked. Mama was always there with the meals. And, I was second by 2 younger brothers that I grew up with. My sister is much younger than I am, and so I laugh because I grew up between boys, and I think that kind of helped me to. I was kind of a tomboy growing up, and fought all the battles for my brothers and all of that.
Yeah.
So.
And what were your siblings' names?
My older brother was Earl, and then I had a brother named Robert, Gerald. And then my sister is Denise.
Denise. And she is one that lives
She's,
in...
yeah, right, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Well, and also you mentioned your dad went to college. Where did he go to school at?
It was Lincoln University in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
He was an athlete, and he graduated from the Gary High School here, Gary Frable, got a scholarship, and he was there.
Did he play basketball or football? Or?
He was a football player.
Football.
In fact, he first started out to a local. It was at that time it was Indiana University Northwest. They didn't call it that then. It was the extension. And I know one year he scored all the touchdowns for the team. Right? Yeah, he was phenomenal.
Wow.
But like I said, he came home because his mother was ill.
Okay.
And he met my mom, and that ended the college career.
Yeah. Okay. Who would you say were the most influential people in your childhood?
I would say probably my dad and my mom were very influential, and my grandmother too was I spent a lot of time at her home, but so mostly family were people that were influential in my childhood. So,
as a young girl, did you have any understanding of your family's politics or political beliefs?
not really. The only thing I can remember vividly is I can remember my grandmother had pictures on the wall. And there was only one picture of a white person, and it happened to be Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And at that time, I know that was a person that she admired, and so I was familiar with, with the two parties. That there were two parties. She was Democrat, and I know one time my dad ran for a precinct committeeman. And he didn't win. My mother always said later on your dad would probably is turning over in his grave now that he knows you're in politics but he was very influential in the public housing that we lived in. In fact, he had gone to an interracial school, Gary Frable, and the people who were like the mayor and the comptroller who were in charge of Gary at that point in time, they were classmates of his. And even now, Peter Visklosky, who is our state representative, his dad and my dad were very good friends. And his dad at one time was the mayor of Gary, and so that was, and I can remember my dad gathering people together for these friends of his from high school that were now in government, so that they could listen. And he was kind of the political person in that particular precinct that they worked with. So I kind of came up with political surroundings.
Okay, that's interesting. And I think I'd read that your families remain friends even.
Absolutely, right. Yeah, now, Peter and I are still good friends.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Great. Did you have any sense of, you said your grandmother obviously admired Roosevelt. Did she talk about his programs, or was it just a politician she respected, or?
I can't remember specifically any programs that she, talked about.
Yeah.
But evidently there was something about him. I don't know whether it was, what he said, or whether it was his carriage, or what it was that she respected. So.
Okay. Well, you said you went to public schools here in Gary, right? And then did you graduate from, was it Gary Roosevelt?
I graduated from Gary Roosevelt, yeah.
And what year was that?
1952.
1952, okay.
And it was interesting. I was president of the class of 1952, which was very unusual for a girl. I can remember my social studies teacher saying to me, that I probably wouldn't win, and maybe this was something I didn't want to do. But I ran anyway, and I beat the guy that I ran against. And interesting, he was very smart, in fact, he turned out to be a doctor, after he'd gone to college and everything, but that was my first run for an office, is when I ran for president of my class. And I think I was the first girl to ever be president of a class.
Wow.
Back in 1952.
Yeah.
It was generally reserved for the guys. So.
Wow, well, good for you.
Right, yeah.
What was it, an integrated high school?
No,
No.
Roosevelt School was a school that its background, it was built especially for African Americans, right? Yeah, and so it was an all-black school.
Okay. What were race relations like in Gary in the 1940s and 50s?
Not very good. I know that there were some incidents. Say, for example, I can remember we have a beach here on Lake Michigan. It's called Marquette Park.
Okay. And
when I was coming up, it was not a place where African Americans felt free to go. And in fact, I can remember one of my dad's friends getting caught out there at Marquette Park Beach and getting beaten. Okay, and so that was a place we didn't go. But I do but they had a pavilion there, and I think it was my class that was the first class that was allowed to have a senior prom at Marquette Pavilion, you know. So we kind of helped to break some of the barriers that were there, and so, like I said, you know, the encounters, racial encounters at that time, you know, basically we all lived, African Americans lived in Midtown, in the middle of Gary, Indiana, so there wasn't a lot of, we had our own businesses and all of that, so there wasn't a lot of opportunities for there to be interaction between the two races, but, you know, and so we basically, you know, lived in the smaller part of Gary, which is Midtown, which is where I grew up.
Okay. Where is that in relation to where we are now?
You know, this is 15th, and so Gary runs from, so downtown Gary would be First and Broadway to about, well, I would say, yeah, about 11th. So between 11th Avenue going north and 35th going south would be like Midtown.
Okay.
And basically from east and west, I would say I'm at 36 past Broadway, so I would say maybe 36 blocks in between would be the middle of Gary. The actual middle of Gary is where we were located, and where Roosevelt School was, and Fravel School, which was really a school, biracial school, you know, but so.
Okay. When did Gary integrate schools? 'Cause, I mean, you graduated before Brown versus Board and things like that.
Right, yeah. Well, but there was integration then, even when I was, yeah.
In certain schools.
In certain schools, right,
Okay.
yeah, because there was a school out south called Lew Wallace that maybe there may have been maybe 20, 30 blacks there, but very spat. And then there was an Emerson school, you know, in downtown Gary, you know, so there were small numbers at the schools before I graduated.
Okay. Well, you were involved in student government in high school. Were there other extracurriculars that you participated in, or?
Well, the GAA, which was the Girls Athletic Association, I participated in that, and there was a club called the Y Chums. We were associated with the YWCA. That I participated in that too. So basically that was the extent.
Well, and did you have a favorite sport? It sounds like you were interested in athletics.
Well, I was interested in athletics, but I ran track for a while when I was in grade school.
Okay.
And I can remember I was the anchor for a relay team, and I spent a lot of my life trying, as most girls do, trying to please their fathers. And my brother also my older brother was a track star. And in fact, he was a long jump champion. He broke a 25-year record. And that's how he kind of got a scholarship to college. We graduated the same year. We were 11 months apart. But he's 11 months older than I am, but we graduated the same year, and so he got a scholarship to the University of Iowa.
Wow.
And I played football for them and did very well. So, but I can remember when I was in high school, and I tease him about this now, is there's certain markers when you do the long jump. You know, you run, and then you flip, and then you go forward. And I could get the markers better than he could at that time, but there was nothing for girls to do, you know, as relates to track at that time, you know. So, but like I said, I ran track and ran on the relay team, and then I played some basketball. I wasn't very tall, you know, but so I played around. But sports have always been a part of my life. Yeah.
Well, I know, like we're jumping ahead a bit, but in the 90s, I think that I don't know if they were actual legislation or rather recognitions of girls' sports days in Indiana.
Right, yeah.
You didn't really probably get to take advantage of that.
Right, yeah.
In
Right,
the 50s.
yeah. I was always cognizant of that,
Uh-huh.
some of the things that we were able to do as relates to sports in here, right? It was always, it was a vehicle for college, and like I said, my brother and I, we graduated the same year, and so he got a scholarship. I had to go to IU Northwest, because my dad couldn't send both of us, even though he got a scholarship, and so I started working the day after I graduated from high school. I worked I wanted to be a secretary because I'd gotten the award for the best secretary from my class, and I thought that's what I would be. And I got a job at the YW, but I tell people this because they find it kind of funny, but I envisioned myself being a secretary sitting on my boss's knee that was rich. And I wound up getting a job as a secretary at a YWCA where all my bosses were women.
Probably a different experience.
Right, yeah. So at that time I decided I would be a teacher. And so because the Y was on 6th Avenue, a block past Broadway, and then on the other side of Broadway, maybe a couple of blocks, was where they had some classes for the extension of IU.
Okay.
And so I would walk from there across and take the courses and everything. So I did 2 years here, and then I went to Indiana University.
In Bloomington.
In Bloomington.
Okay. What made you decide on teaching then?
Well, in those days, when you looked at jobs for women, especially for black women, it was either a teacher, a nurse, or a secretary, and so I just decided on teaching. I picked that one as the one to do. Yeah.
Okay. When you were either at what is now IU Northwest or down in Bloomington, were you involved in other campus activities? Did you get involved in politics then, or?
Not really. I didn't. I remember we had our little, the dorm that I lived in, we had our little, group that kind of ran things within the dorm. I was in a dorm where we shared expenses, It was a co-op dorm. So I can remember I did chair the committee that kind of interacted with the people who over the kind of represented our interests in things,
Sure.
to those people who were in charge. But I did join a sorority. I did, but I led a pledge revolt. It was interesting. The young lady that was head of the sorority down there, she was already a soror. She had been dating who soon became my boyfriend and my husband, and so she made it hard on me, okay? Oh man, so I led this revolt, and they brought the national president down to IU, and so it delayed me getting to be a Delta, and so I never went back to try to be one again,
Yeah.
So as I look back over my life, things that I've done, a lot of times I was in a position where I was kind of a leader, and so every kind of step of the way I was, right, yeah.
In sort of a different capacity.
Right,
but,
yeah.
Okay. So, did you graduate from IU in about 56 or so, around that time?
57.
57, okay. Can you tell me about your employment history after you graduated from college? Or where'd you go?
Yeah. Well, right after I graduated from college, I got married.
Okay.
Okay. And my husband was in the service.
Okay.
And so he was in Germany, and so I spent almost a year in Germany before I came out to teach. I lived in Germany for about a year.
Wow.
And then I came back. Gary was new and building and the schools and all that. So there was a new school that I was assigned to, and I was one of the first teachers to teach at this new school. So right, yeah. So I started my teaching career, and soon thereafter, I joined the Gary Teachers Union, and it was their suggestion that I run for state representative first.
Okay.
You know, so in 1978, I think it was,
Okay.
I ran for state representative, and I lost. It was kind of interesting because it was I was the treasurer of the Gary Teachers Union.
Okay.
And so we were having this executive committee meeting. And so after you have an executive committee meeting, then you would disband into a committee on political education called COPE. So I never was that interested, in politics. So my brother was, at this time, he was a basketball coach. And so I got up to listen to find out what the score was in the radio in another room. And when I came back, this guy who was on the board said, I think that person ought to be Earline Rogers. I said, Earline Rogers, what? Well, this is Jewel Harris, was state representative, but he is not going to run this year. He was the person that was there for labor, and we want you to run. But you got to get down there real fast because filing closes in 2 days. And you had to go down to Indianapolis to file. I didn't know what I was doing, so I came home first. I asked my mom because my daughter, I had a son and a daughter at that time. If she would, work, would, mind them while I was away. And then, of course, my husband, he was a fireman.
Okay.
And so he was, work one day and off too. And so we got all that straightened out. We headed down to Indianapolis. I filed to run and then come back and try to put a campaign together in that very short-lived time.
Oh, my goodness.
And, of course, I lost. But while I was out there, because the candidates sometimes they would be in a group and then they would go in like to speak to people, to groups. And I can remember we were at the senior citizens home. And so this guy that I had voted for all these years, he was kind of jingling change in his pocket, And I said, what are you doing, He said, these are silver dollars. He says, all I got to do is go in here and pass out these silver dollars and I'll get their votes. I just thought that was so awful. I just, and I thought to myself, now I voted for this guy all these years, and this is how he thinks, So I decided at that time, I want to get into politics and see if I can do it the right way, And so I lost that race. So the next year it was a race for city council, and I ran, and it was a district council race, and I was right here in this district anyway, and so I won, and so then I became a council person. At my second year, I was elected president, first woman to ever be president of the Gary City Council.
Wow.
And I stayed there for 2 years. And then an opening came up in Indianapolis. Our congressman died. His name was Adam Benjamin. And so Katie Hall, who was then a senator, she went to Congress. Carolyn Mosby went from the House to the Senate.
Okay.
And I came down from the Gary Common Council down to the House.
Okay.
And it was in 1982.
Okay. So were you, so Mosby resigned to go to the Senate, right? That's what you said. So were you specially appointed that time, or did you have to run an election for her seat?
It was the precinct organization in the district that voted.
Okay, they voted.
That sent me there.
Okay.
Right,
so then
right,
the next cycle you had to go on your own.
To run.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I was up for the one to go to Congress. But at that time, Richard Hatcher was our mayor. Mm-hmm. And at that time, it was the district chairperson who decided who would go to Congress.
Okay.
And I was, it was about three of us, Katie Hall, a guy named Bob Pastrick, and myself that were running. And so it's interesting, I represented a group, a place out here called Black Oak that was really people who were from Tennessee, Southern India, from the South. Mm-hmm. They were all white. But when I became city council person, then I got to know them, and I can remember one time they had a flood, and I rode around in the pickup truck with them and all of that. And so one of the guys out there, he thought I should be one to go to Congress, okay? Mm-hmm. And so the catcher had this big meeting where people could come in and say who they wanted to go. This guy's name, I'll never forget, his name was Ernie Davis. He came in, and so he said, well, I think we'll send Miss Rogers, our council lady, to Washington. Because I tell you, Miss Rogers, she might be black on the outside, but she white on the inside.
Oh, my goodness. Like, what did he mean by that exactly?
I guess, he thought it was a compliment. That I was black, but I guess I understood white people. I don't know, but that's what. And he came to me afterwards, and he said, what did I say? People just started laughing and falling over, and okay, Earline, just let you out of this, Oh, me, oh my. So, that's not the reason she had a lot. She was already a senator.
Right.
So it was, made sense for her to go and move this. Right, so.
Now, what was your relationship like with Mayor Hatcher?
Interestingly enough, we had, we were in college together down at IU. Mm-hmm. And we used to ride back and forth because his best friend was one of my best friends. And they lived in Michigan City, and we lived in Gary. And so I would ride back and forth. So I knew Dick very well. Mm-hmm. We got along. We got along fine. Initially, I know I worked extremely hard. I was teachers for Hatcher when he ran for mayor and all of that, Now, when I got on the city council, that's when I guess the relation between us was not as good as one would have thought, because of our background of knowing each other. But like I said, I got to be the president of the council, and the police showed up at a council meeting to complain about the condition of the police cars. And so the council decided, me leading the decision, that what we would do is we would have an inspection of the police cars and designate a time and a place, So when Hatcher found out about it, he called me up and he said, listen, we're not having any inspection of any police cars, And so I said, well, why not? He says, we're just not going to do that. You are not going to. I said, oh, yes, I am. Okay. So I subpoenaed the police cars. Okay. He called me up. He said, I've never in all my life been subpoenaed. I said, well, you are now, you know. And so after that, the relationship, you know, was not the same. And then I would resent the fact that he would call me and want me to vote a certain way, and I would say why. He says, why are you asking me why? I said, well, you know, I might run into somebody at the grocery store or something like that. You're not going to run into anybody at the grocery store is going to ask you why you voted for this, you know. And so we didn't get as along as well as one would have thought, since we'd had such a close relationship, you know, before then. So.
Well, if I can jump back a few steps here to get a few things in chronological order. So,
okay.
So you went down to IU and you met your husband at IU, but he was from Gary as well?
No, he's from East St. Louis, Illinois.
Oh.
Football player.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's his name?
Louis.
Louis. Okay.
Louis.
Okay. And then when did you have children?
Okay, well, it was after I got married. I was married 5 years before I had children.
Okay.
We, like I said, he got inducted into the Army out of college.
Okay.
And so he got stationed in Germany. But before he was stationed in Germany, how I met him, I'm down there because my friends had been down there before, okay, and so I'm down in a place called the Commons, you know, where everybody meets, you know, and so we're sitting there at the table talking, they're trying to acclimate me to everything, you know. So the door opens, and in comes the football team, okay. And in comes this guy that I thought this was the most handsome guy I'd ever seen in my life, okay. So he comes straight over there to me, and he says to my friend, introduce me to her. And so she made the introductions, you know. Then when I heard his name, it was a name that I had heard before, about how he had all these girls and they ironed his shirts and they did his homework, you know. And so I turned around and said, oh, okay, I'm not interested.
Do you have to dispute that at all?
So no, he's not going to dispute that. So then, hey, look, so then the next thing, a couple of days later, the phone rings. Hey, I know a guy that's interested in meeting you. I know I've made a mistake and you don't interest in me, but you know. And so he'll be over at the Tree Center at 7 o'clock. You're interested, you know. And so then I go over there and it's him, you know. So that's how we got. So here we are now, 63 years,
wow.
No, 60. Because it'll be 64 years. We'll be married in December, so this was 2 years before.
Wow.
So about 66 years I've known him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So then, like I said, we lived in Germany.
Where did you live in Germany?
Huh?
Where were you at in Germany?
Ulm.
Okay.
Germany. So then I left Germany to come back to teach, and he was still over there. He played football in the service, you know.
Okay.
So
wow.
he was still over there, and I came back, and so then after he graduated, after he was out of the service, he came here to Gary.
Okay.
Well, we got married before he left.
For Germany.
For Germany.
Okay.
He didn't want to leave me down there unwed.
Smart move.
So we were married 5 years before I had my son.
Okay. And what's your son's name?
Keith.
Keith. Okay. And what year was he born then?
He's 58. What year is that? What year was Keith born? He just turned 58 in July.
Okay.
Add that up. What year was that?
Probably about 58, right? Like 58 or 59?
Yeah.
Close to it?
Right, yeah.
Probably. Okay.
Well, we were married in 55.
Or maybe 60.
60, maybe 60.
Oh, yeah, 60.
Right, 60, right,
okay.
Yeah.
And then did you say you had a daughter as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
My daughter's 11 years younger.
Okay. 11
Right,
years
yeah.
younger. Okay. So you started to tell me, running for that first office and lost, but how did you become more seriously involved in politics? What sort of drove you to get into that?
Well, like I said, that little encounter I had with the guy that was jingling the money in his pocket, I'm thinking, that's not right.
Right.
We need somebody that's in there for all the right reasons. And then by my being a teacher, there were a lot of, and the teachers union, there were a lot of teacher issues that came up, that the resolution of those issues, were with the state.
Okay.
And so my colleagues thought, that I could make a difference down there because of my background in education. And so when I went down there, of course, most of my interests were directed toward education and union activities. So those were two. And then, of course, city problems, since I served on the council, and Gary was certainly a city in which there were problems, and so those were the areas, the labor, the education, and government, local government. Those were the three areas that I thought that I could make a difference in.
Okay. Did you have any, as you're getting involved in state government, did you have any national political heroes or people you were sort of following at the time?
Not really.
What about within the state? Were you aware of other sort of leaders within the state, or?
No, not really. I wasn't really that involved or knew that much about state government.
Yeah.
I went down to the legislature kind of blind to it all, but no, nobody. Now, I knew of Katie Hall, and Carolyn Mosby. Those two, the two women that kind of preceded me, down there. But wasn't really aware of anything specific that they had done that I would have made me more interested in, in what was going on.
Sure.
So, right, yeah.
Okay. When you ran that first time and lost, do you recall who your opponent was? Did you lose in the primary, or was it in the regular election?
Oh, it's always in the primary here. It's always Democratic. No Republicans ever run and win.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, the only Republican I knew growing up was that old man down the street whose grandfather voted for Abraham Lincoln or something, But,
That's funny.
But other than that,
Yeah.
they just were not a factor.
Okay.
And but what I really found out? I really found out that was a plus for me, because they had never been an enemy. And I really was not that familiar with them and what, what their thoughts were, or, where they stood on issues and all of that. So all of that was new to me, the differences between Democrat and Republican. Because once we ran here as the primary, then that was it.
Yeah.
Most of the times I didn't even have a Republican opponent.
Sure.
So I didn't go there not liking Republicans, okay, because I didn't know that much, about them and where they stood on it. I mean, it didn't take me very long after I got down there to see the differences, but I didn't go down there, with a disdain or fear for the party,
That's really interesting.
Yeah, which I think, I consider that a plus.
Well, since it was mostly or all Democratic up here, did you find in the primaries that things would get heated in elections?
Yeah.
Did people have very vastly different political ideas even?
No, it's almost like a personality thing, you know. I
Mhm.
mean, you know, politics and where you stood on certain issues weren't nearly as important. The fact is, you know, you're born in Gary, you grew up in Gary, and you know, you served in this capacity. Your
Mhm.
background experiences and all of that, those were more, you know, important than any issues that
Okay.
you know that we deal with. Because most of us were always on the same side or
Mhm.
same had the same position on particular issues.
Sure.
You know.
That's interesting. Okay. You were appointed, so for that first time, which would have been 82, right?
Mhm.
So when it came around to the next actual election, what was your first election day like?
I'm trying to think who I ran against. At that time, it was like a two-member district, and I can remember one of the persons that was running was Robert Rucker, the Supreme Court guy,
Mm-hmm.
and it was so interesting when he found out that he was not going to win. Okay, he would come to the campaign meetings and campaign for me. It was so interesting. Sometimes going in and out of the State House, I'd run into him, you know,
Yeah.
and we'd laugh and talk about, you know, those days when, you know, when I was just starting out and he was starting out, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so I wound up winning and continuing to stay, you know, and then he gets appointed to the Supreme
Wow.
Court.
It's a pretty good movement too, I'd say.
Right, yeah. But like I said, it at one time it was a two-member district, so you know, and there weren't a lot of people that were interested in running for state rep
Mm-hmm.
or running for an office that would take them from home. So it was never, you know, an office that was that sought after.
Sure.
It was mostly the local, you know, the mayor, the city council, the county council, you know, that people were interested in. And especially where women were concerned, you know, they
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to take that kind of a position.
Right. Well, I want to come back to that issue in just a second because I think that's important that you had to leave Gary
Okay.
to serve for a couple months. But what did you find, or what were you thinking that first day as you walked into the State House?
Well, I wasn't afraid. I I mean, it's overwhelming, you know, because the only other time I'd been down there is when I went down there to sign up to run. Okay, and so, but you know, I had Charlie Brown, you know, and in the House with me, so I had somebody right there in the House with me, and then Carolyn Mosby in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had, you know, them there, you know, to
Mhm.
kind of talk to. And so it wasn't very long after that I ran into my roommates. Okay, it wasn't the first year, but it was this, after I got a chance to know. You know Sheila Clinker from Lafayette?
I have not met her yet, but the name is familiar. Yeah, she's on my list.
She, and then there was Anita Bowser from Michigan City,
Mm-hmm.
and so the three of us, somehow or another, because both of us were teachers, okay. Clinker was a teacher, and Anita was a professor at Notre Dame. And so we met, you know, in caucus and all that, got to like each other. And so after that first year, we roomed together.
Okay.
We found us an apartment, and I'd say, I mean, up until I left, well, it was the three of us, and then Anita died. I forget what year she died. And then it was just Sheila and myself. And then we were together, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting when we moved into the Columbia Club. that bastion for Republican men. But it was, it was a great experience for me. I'd be like, we'd be like the only three Democrats that were there, but we'd be sitting down talking to Bob Garden, President Pro Tem of the Senate, and getting to know people, on a social level, and get an opportunity really to like people, And so, like I said, so it was always the three of us until I think it was the year probably when Anita died, because Anita died at the Columbia Club. I had come in that weekend because I would come in and and stop in to see how she was doing and all of that, and she wasn't doing very well, and she died later on that day. So then it was just Sheila and myself, so the two of us continued to stay at the Columbia Club, and Sheila, up until maybe 2015, when Sheila started to commute back and forth, and so then I was down there by myself, but...
Well, where was your first apartment out then?
It was, what was the name of that place? River something. It was an apartment.
Like a natural apartment
Like
building.
a natural apartment, right, yeah.
Now, was the athletic clubs open when you were there? Because didn't the Democrats used to go to the athletic club?
They used to go to the athletic
over...
club, right. At the time, well, it was so funny because Joe Harrison, you had to get a sponsor to go into the Columbia Club.
Okay.
So Sheila called me, and so she said, Joe Harrison wants to sponsor us. But I said, what? So she said, yeah. I said, okay, go ahead. I don't care. I'm fine. So he was our sponsor. And we moved into the Columbia Club, and we became members of the Columbia Club and stuff, So.
Why did he want to do that, or what were his
I think they
motivations?
were low on memberships or something. I don't know why he did it, but, and I didn't question why, I said, well, okay, hey.
Yeah.
Gives me a chance to really find out, how people really are and see whether or not, And so, like I said, it was fine. We'd sit down there and talk and found out that we were more alike than we were different, really, So.
Well, sort of jumping back to what we were just talking about, how old were your kids, I guess, when you were running?
Well, let's see, my daughter, was she 11 maybe? And I think my son was in college, right, yeah.
So what was that like, having to leave for a couple months,
Right, yeah.
Every year?
It wasn't difficult, because she stayed with my mom, my grandmother, and my older brother, he had two children that stayed there, because he and his wife were teachers, and so and even we were all teachers. The three of us, the three older ones, were teachers, and so my mother was like, she had a daycare every day with her grandkids, and so my daughter never, suffered anything. In fact, she enjoyed it. They had fun, and so interesting now. Whenever she does something that I'm not proud of, she tries to point to the fact that she was left alone. That's if you hadn't spent so much time. I said, look, you had your grandmother. Your grandmother raised me, So no, but she, it was fine. Yeah, and then like I said, on the days her dad was off, most nights he would have her at home, so it was fine. It worked out. There were no problems there.
Yeah. Well, how did it work for your teaching career?
Well, I would start in September and teach until January.
Okay.
Then I would take a leave of absence through the legislature, and then I would come back in April or March or whenever. Right, yeah.
And I'm assuming the schools liked that because then you were sort of representing them there, or was
Yeah.
that problematic to get subs or things?
No, well, they would get one person that would take my place, you know. And I would, like when I would come in on Fridays, I would, stop and see how the kids were doing and all of that. I didn't have to do that, but I did that, to try to keep up with where they are.
Yeah.
So that when I came back in March or April, I could pick up and finish out the school year.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess I never asked, what grade did you teach and what subject?
Elementary grades.
Okay.
All the elementary grades I taught. Started out with first grade, second grade, I remember one year I taught the second grade, and so the next year I taught third grade. So when I walked in the classroom, the kids thought they had failed. Oh, Miss Rogers!
She's that's funny.
Right, no, but it was all, and then I was a resource teacher. Probably the last 10 years, and I worked with paraprofessionals. I would go from school to school and interact with teacher and paraprofessional, make certain that they were working well together and all of that. So I wasn't in the classroom for the last years that I taught.
Okay. Were you for the majority of your career, were you at the same elementary, or did you move around?
Right, yeah. Same.
And which one was that?
It was Bethune School.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned, Charlie Brown and some of the other people you knew as you were getting into the House, but how did you learn the ins and outs of state government, and did you have mentors to sort of help guide you?
No, I didn't really have any mentors. I just picked it up, in my interactions with other legislators and stuff, and Anita Bowser, she was very important in terms of, the law, because she was a lawyer and taught law, and so I learned a lot from her. We'd have good conversations at night and all of that. So, so it was just my surroundings and people that I came in contact with that I learned about state government, other than that you get, in a textbook.
Sure. How did you know the needs and wants of your constituents, of people back in Gary?
Well, I had, like I said, as far as the schools were concerned, I'd been an integral part of that, so I knew that. And then as far as, government was concerned, I was aware of, the problems that we had, in city government. And and having grown up here and knowing people and, so, I was aware of what was going on, what the problems were.
Well, in the early years of your time in the House, and then when you were on the City Council too, what were some of the problems Gary was facing?
Well, we've always had problems with the children in education, being keeping up, being on a par with others. And so I spent a lot of time actually talking and dealing with, legislation that, like early learning experiences, and making them see how important it was, and the difference in terms of how a child comes to school from a city like Gary and maybe one from a more affluent, in terms of their vocabulary, in terms of the interest of the parents and all of that. So, I felt that really a part of my importance there was to educate my peers about not only the importance of the background when a child hit school, but how that impacts the scores and everything, you know. And by my being a teacher, you know, and doing that and teaching elementary grades, you know, I remember, I forget the vocabulary that a child from one kind of a home comes from, and maybe one from another kind, and how that impacts, you know. And so that, and then, like I said, being on the city council and not having the resources, you know, say for example like the police cars, and how that impacted, you know, problems we had with crime and all of that, you know. So
do you remember the first bill you sponsored?
nope.
Well, you had a lot of legislation over the years.
I know it. So, do you don't have that?
I probably do. I can look it up. I just wondered if you had a specific memory of that.
Not the first one.
Yeah.
No, I've got bills that stand out.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure we'll probably get to some of those.
In some ways, you've already talked about this a little bit, but can you describe the regular interaction amongst the assembly members? What was it like on the floor versus in the Columbia Club or elsewhere?
Well, you know, surprisingly enough, what I found so surprising was the lack of opportunities to interact with the other house. You know, I mean, in the house, I didn't get a chance to deal with the Senate because the gavel would pound and everybody would go their own way. Okay. Some people, especially those legislators who lived in Indianapolis, they would go home and go back and get right back into their normal environment. And then, of course, some people would go that lived in houses while they were down there. You know, they would go, you know, so they had a regular home atmosphere. Sheila, I used to tell people I spent half my time trying to keep up with Sheila Clinker. We went to every reception. But it was an opportunity to meet and interact with people that you wouldn't have a chance to interact with before, you know. So we always made the reception, and so because it's so surprising to me that you don't get a chance to get to know people if outside of whatever your interactions are on the floor, you know.
So what types of receptions would these be?
All of them, you know, like the bankers and the retired teachers or the Chamber of Commerce. Yeah. We went to all of them, you know, which is good because that's where you get to learn the issues and people who are, you know, who are important to whether or not you get legislation passed and all of that, you know, so, yeah.
What were interactions like between the majority and minority parties?
Okay. When I first went down there, of course, in the House, Democrats were in the majority, okay, and so but it didn't seem as though there was as wide a division between the two parties initially. Okay. Now I don't know whatever you and so I know at that sometimes over there. I remember when I first went down there. I think I was on the last row. You know when you do, and so I'm sitting next to a Republican. I forget his name. Was it Spencer? I forget who it was. But I'm sitting next to a Republican. We got to be good friends. You know.
I can probably look it up right here.
Okay.
I think I have that.
Okay.
But so like seatmates were important too.
Right. Yeah. And it was one. You're not supposed to vote for anybody else.
Spencer, yeah.
Spencer. You're not supposed to vote for anybody, you know, like if you're not in your seat. And so I remember one time he wasn't in his seat and he was telling me, hey, push my button, push my button, push my button. And so some of the guys on the Republican side say, hey, you're not telling her to push. He said, she'll push the right button for me, you know.
Yeah.
So we got to be good friends, you know. And that was, like I said, I don't. When I first went there, I mean, we had our differences, but you know, we it was not nearly what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, of course, I don't know what it is today now, but like I said, I never felt big difference. You know, I know one time of course, this was just a few years ago when I was in the Senate. Senator Rotz, you know, he told everybody, he said, you know what she said to me one time? She said to me, I can't believe a nice person like you belong to the Republican. So, you know, get them, and I know, I forget this one senator, I forget his name, he, every time he would see me, he would talk real loud. Hey, sir, you know, what the hell's wrong with you, you know? I know you can't hear, you're old, you know, and stuff like that. And, you know, just laughed, you know, and, you know, passed off, you know. He was on the same floor with me when I was in the Senate. And if I saw him now, he would raise his voice like I can't hear because I'm much older than he is, you know.
So
but,
was that like in good fun, or was he being offensive?
No, that was in good fun.
Okay.
That was in good fun,
Yeah.
you know, right, you know, so,
Yeah.
right. And you get to be really close to some people, just like even now I've got, you know, Facebook friends, you know, from the other party that we still keep up with, you know, like Tom Weiss.
Well, I talked to him on Friday, and he told me I had to tell you hello.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yes.
okay. And we went through something together. My son had cancer, his wife had cancer, you know, and so going through something like that together, you know, there's a bond there that political parties just can't break up, you know.
Yeah.
So, right, yeah. So, and like I said, you know, and I had the opportunity to go on a lot of trips, you know, like to Europe, to China, to South America. And so when you're together like that in another country, then, you know, the bonding, you know, kind of takes place because you go through the same experience together, you know,
Sure.
like, and you take pictures and stuff like that, you know. So like I said, and even Johnny Nugent and I are Facebook friends, you know. We'll probably get to that when we get to the casinos. Because one time he made me an honorary member of the NRA. And that was fun, you know. It was a House resolution. I said, hey, look, this can never get back to Gary, Indiana, you know.
That's
So,
funny. Well, walk me through the process of generating a bill. How did that work?
a lot of times, you know, different groups with different interests might, you know, ask you to, you know, to have a bill, you know, done, or it might be something that happens, you know, like I guess the one that comes right to mind was like the Paula Cooper case. Juveniles and the death penalty was something that happened. And as I researched juveniles and the death penalty, I saw that Indiana had the lowest age at which a child could be put to death, as low as 10. You know, they could have, the way our laws worked, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I know that came as a result. Mm-hmm. That's how I got that legislation done. And then we had JoJo's Law was we had a preschooler that was killed in a car accident riding in one of these 18-passenger vans, and so things like that came up like in my community, were things that encouraged me to try to.
So if something came up in the community, then would you gather research on it and then send it to...
research on it, and then talk to them, in legislative services, and put together some legislation addressing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would you garner support for the legislation then?
Well, just after you got the legislation done, look at what groups would be affected by it, and have an exchange and conversation with them. Let them take a look at it. Talk to different caucus members who might have a background, that they can aid and assist you, in terms of getting, something passed. Everybody had their own specialties, and and had experiences where, dealing with these specialties, and so, like I said, basically that, or like the ISTA might have something and think that, you might be a good person to carry the legislation, and so legislation would come from outside of you to you, or you would see something that you were interested in and try and get something passed.
Was a lot of the conversation around the legislation, on the floor, or did a lot of it also occur at the Columbia Club or at the receptions?
Right, yeah.
All of the above?
All of the above, right, yeah. And like at the Columbia Club, some nights we walk in after session, you got this big table, round table, okay? And there are Democrats there and Republicans, and you go and take a seat at the table and just kind of talk about stuff. Sometimes there would be lobbyists there, that you get an opportunity to talk to a lobbyist about something, or they would talk to you, and just in kind of a comfortable atmosphere,
So a lot of business maybe isn't the word I want, but a lot of discussion at least, behind the scenes or in informal atmospheres
right,
too.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I found that to be very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you then have a sense of how people would usually vote on an issue before it actually came to the floor, or not?
No. I mean, I thought it was always important to know, have an idea and meet with people individually and see where they are on a particular piece, or, and generally, there's honesty that's there. Nobody's going to tell you, yeah, I'll vote for it, and then turn around and not vote for it without at least, letting you know where they were, especially if it was an issue that was important.
So you felt like people were trustworthy in that sense, absolutely, of letting you know where they stood.
Where they stood, right, yeah.
Okay.
So.
During your tenure, maybe starting with the House, and then we can talk about the Senate, but what roles did party leadership play?
Well, like I said, it was the first time when I first went there, Democrats were, in leadership positions, and so then I had to adjust to Republicans being in leadership positions. But in reality, because of the conservative nature of a lot of the Democrats, there was not a stark difference between positions. I found that out, In fact, I used to talk about the Ohio River Boys, They were the conservative Democrats. I remember a lot of times in caucus I'd say, well, how did this person get to be a Democrat? You know, I mean, how can you be a Democrat? You know, I just, you know, so there are different shades of Democrats that I had to get accustomed to. You know, I mean, I'm thinking, you know, Democrats, Labor, yeah, you know, and so then you got somebody, you know, that's not what, you know. So I had to learn the differences within the party, you know, and which was always interesting.
Did you see those differences in the Democratic side change during your time there, or were they pretty consistent?
They were pretty consistent. But yeah. No. I think changes. I remember, and I don't know what year, the advent of the Tea Party. I think that was eye-opening for me in terms of, you know, the schism that was there between the two parties, you know, so, and it was, for a while there, you know, it was really stark. But then after a while, people just seemed like to not be so set. And these people that were coming into the legislature, you know, they came in, you know, with, I thought, not even a willingness to try to understand the other side and try to find common ground. You know, it was really a different time. But then that too kind of filtered down, and so then we were back.
And I'm not sure if I have the years right on this, but
I
it
don't
seems
either.
like that was 2008, 2010. Was it even earlier than that, maybe? Or rather, I guess that's not so much my concern is
Yeah, that would be about the time.
probably.
Right.
So you felt like there were maybe a handful of years where it was hard to just discuss across the aisle,
Absolutely.
where it
Right,
hadn't
yeah.
been the case before.
Absolutely. Right, yeah.
And then,
yeah.
so your last few years, did you feel like that had toned
That
down?
toned down.
Huh.
That had toned down, right, yeah.
That's interesting. Well, then, what was the purpose of the Democratic caucus? How did it function? What was its role?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean about.
I guess, can you describe what the purpose of the Democratic caucus was? So you would come together, and what would be the goal of doing that, I guess?
Okay, I guess look at legislation, basically, you know, and, you know, see what its effect was on, you know, different areas of the state, and listen to, you know, what other people are saying, kind of go through, you know, bills and stuff and see where everybody was, you know. That's basically what we would, you know, do in caucus, you know. And say, for example, if I had a bill, you know, I would discuss it with the caucus and see, you know, where their problems were, and if anybody had any problems with it, you know, make certain you come see me so we can talk about it. So basically, you know, we used our caucus meetings to kind of discuss what was going on, you know, so.
So trying to get everyone like on the same page before you then went into
Right,
session?
yeah,
Is that
right,
part
make
of it?
sure everybody understands, you know, what's going on, and so.
Okay. What about the Black caucus then? Same type of.
Okay. Yeah, well, you know, that legislation that was particularly important in the Black community, you know, say, for example, like lately it's been like the hate crimes bill, you know, and our inability to, you know, get movement on that, or just maybe state party issues, you know, in terms of candidates that might be running, you know, and what their backgrounds were, and whether or not the state party chairman of the Democratic Party was interacting, you know, with the caucus and all of that, you know. So there weren't really a host of differences, you know, within our caucus as it relates to where the caucus was and where the Black caucus You know, it was. Sometimes it had to do with leadership, you know, in the caucus. Because I remember when I was assistant minority leader in the Senate, you know, I remember Richard Young, who was running for caucus chair, you know, he came to me and he basically offered me the caucus chair. And I said, well, why not assistant minority caucus? I'm bringing, I forget, I had the votes of all the black caucus members, and I had Anita Bowser, Rose Antich. I had the numbers, you know. And so he said, well, okay, if you got those numbers for me, then I've got these numbers for you. And that's how I became assistant minority leader, you know. So nothing, you know, no anger or none of that, just an awareness that we always try to have, you know, with the caucus positions on different issues, where we stood on them, you know, so.
Well, now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but weren't you also, was it like assistant party chairman for the Democratic Party in Indiana?
Right, yeah.
So how did you get more heavily involved with that as well?
I'm trying to see how I'm trying to remember how I got that position. Well, John Livengood and I were good friends, for one thing, and worked well together, you know. And so it wasn't my idea to be vice chair of the party, but when he looked at, you know, the different offices that were there and the impact that the black community had on the Democratic Party, they thought it important to let everybody know that, you know, that that blacks were important to the party, and the best way to show it is to have somebody in leadership, you know. And so it was interesting. I went Posey County all over the state, you know, and oh me, I was laughing one time. I said, well, they said, what are you looking at? I said, well, I'm looking at the low-hanging limbs to see what I might be hanging from one of these limbs on the tree, you know. But it was fun. You know, I got to meet a lot of people, good friends and all of that, you know. So, yeah.
Interesting. Was there ever conflict traveling in other parts of the state? Did you ever?
No. Never felt anything. No.
What does the public not know about how the General Assembly operates?
I don't think that they recognize the camaraderie that's there. I'm not too sure about now, you know, how things are working, but, you know, when I was there, I don't think that they recognize that, you know, if a Democrat offered a bill that it would have problems, you know. I don't think that they realize, you know, differences between the two parties, or why one party thinks one way and one party. I think that then I think their expectations in terms of what you're able to do might be greater than what you're able to produce, you know, and may not know the difficulty of getting agreement on something so that it goes through the legislature. You know, what might seem very simple to them in terms of their thoughts, they don't, especially if there's not the exchange that normally goes on in a community, you know. Like I said, here in Gary, it would be much more difficult for them to understand something than it would if there was interaction on not a daily basis, but a frequent basis, you know, in terms of differences between the two parties, you know, so.
Well, what were the most controversial legislative issues during your time in the Assembly?
It's got to be the casino issue. I tell you, I got one lady, I meant to keep that letter. She wrote me a letter saying that I was surely going to go to hell, you know, because of this, you know. And interesting, here in Gary, I mean, the two prominent ministers were on either side. My minister was supportive, but like Carolyn Mosby's minister and her congregation, you know, so it was all of that, you know, that was a part of it. Mm-hmm. And because there were so many negatives associated with casino gaming, like the mafia and prostitution and drugs and all of that, you know. So it was an interesting experience, that whole casino effort, you know, which was, there was a guy named Bob Spoyar who was I've been meaning to ask where he is, and we got to be very friends. He was a former Garyite, and he lives in Lebanon, Indiana, and he was a lobbyist, okay? And he just basically thought casinos would be good for Gary. And I can remember him approaching me in the hall and saying, Earline, you know, this would be so good for Gary. Mm-hmm. And I said, all right, okay, that I didn't know what I was stepping into either. Okay, I said, yeah, you're right. It was the year after we, you know, passed the fact that Indiana could gamble. Mm-hmm. Okay, it was that one, you know. And so Carolyn, so then he said, can you set up a meeting between me and your mayor? At that time, the mayor's name was Tom Barnes. And I said, yeah. And so I got in contact with the mayor, and they met, and then the mayor was positive about this, you know, because we've had problems all along with trying to get enough money to provide city services. And so he was very positive about it, and so then we met, and Carolyn Mosby at the time was in the Senate, and she sent to Atlanta to New Jersey to get the legislation. And the legislation came back, and Bob Spoyar and Carolyn and I, we sat down and put the legislation together. She filed it in the Senate, but then they found out since it was a revenue legislation, it had to be filed in the House, and that's how I got it, okay? And the first vote, first of all, we had a very good committee meeting, and we had a guy named Carl Zeitz that used to be on the Gaming Commission in New Jersey that aided and assisted us in the legislation and all of that, and testified at committee, and everybody was surprised it passed out of committee, okay? And then it came to the floor, and we got 46 votes that first time, which says, okay, this might be a bill that could eventually be passed. And it was so interesting. A guy named Dick Mangus, I was coming down the hall, he was coming down the hallway, and he said, look, how am I going to go back to my constituents and tell them that a black lady from Gary, Indiana, talked me into voting for a casino bill? I said, hey, look, that's your problem, not mine. But yeah, so anyway, so that's how it all started, and, you know, we finally got something through. In fact, there they had an article in yesterday's paper. We are still trying to get the casinos. We're trying to get them out of Buffington Harbor now, which is where our boats are, and because we've got a better use for that, and so we want to move them, to land, and so we're going to have some legislation that's going to try to, at last, take them. Well, we went from the water to the footprint, and now we're going to try to get them from the footprint, somewhere else. And so I lobby for the Majestic Star Casino now.
Okay.
Interesting. I started last year, and when I ran into my former legislators down there, they said, "Okay, so you're on the darker side of the process now, huh?"
Sure, you know how it works.
Right. I said, no. I said, here's one lobbyist
Yeah.
that you guys know how important it is to be truthful about everything, so. But.
Well, what was your motivation in first working on the casino issue?
It's always been getting money for Gary. I don't know. I was born here, and so I feel I've got it, and I've been able to be successful here, and I just feel as though that if we could just get something going here, and with the steel mills, on the decline, and people without jobs and all of that, I was looking for something that would change the direction in which the city seemed to be going, and it was always just trying to get money for the city, so meet city services, our schools, and we got low tax. We got a low percentage of people who pay taxes, and people in their homes, they just get up. I forget how many abandoned homes we have, and I just felt as though here's something that we could turn the city around, and so we took casino gaming, but then we had, at the same time, they were trying to get horse racing passed, and so that's when the horse racing people, I remember getting into it with Larry Borst, He told me, he said, you know what, I don't like anybody from Lake County anyway. He said, in fact, I don't like anybody but my dog and my wife, And I thought to myself, I didn't dare say it. I wanted to say, is that in that order? But I knew not to say that, to him, but we finally, we worked it out. We realized, and I understood, that he had been the driving force to get this changed, and it was horse racing that was driving it, okay. And I also understood the fact that when there was horse racing and casino gaming in the same state, that the casino took monies away from the horse. So I understood, it's right. So, but we worked it out, because initially what we did was, for every $1 admission, for the $3 admission, one of those dollars went to the horse racing industry. So there are ways to work things out, down there without, But like I said, I had to fight so that, and then, the religious people who talked about what money changers somewhere in the Bible, I didn't understand all of that, so there were these religious objections to it. And then, like I said, mostly it had to do with, we did on the river, we did the river boats, because it was thought that the police, they could be buffered, and that nobody had to. You didn't have to go over that way if you didn't want to. They would be on the water, out of everybody's way. And so it was all in an effort to try and assure people that, yeah, this was casino gaming, but it would not negatively impact, the fabric of a particular city. So that was the genesis of it, and so it was interesting. Now the city of Gary, the bill didn't call for us to have any input into who we picked, okay, to be a license holder. But so we got 2 licenses. I mean, all along the state really tried to aid, to show Gary that, we appreciate what you've done and the importance of what you've done and all of this. So we were the only location that had 2 licenses. Okay. So we had 2 licenses. And so we picked Don Barton, who was an African American out of Detroit. And we picked a group called Monarch that was out of Las Vegas to be the other license holder. And I remember getting a call from Jack Thar, who was the gaming commissioner at that time. And he said, we think that you all need a top name for one of your votes, and we think that name ought to be Donald Trump. Okay? So it's so funny when so we had a process here where I was on the committee where we interviewed people coming in. Mm-hmm. So this one day it was that they would come to City Hall, and this group would ask questions and all of that. And so I was there on that committee, and so I'm back at the coffee urn pouring me some coffee, and this hand reaches out and says, "Hi, I'm Donald Trump." And I looked around and I said, "Yeah, you are Donald Trump." Aren't you? We shook hands, and we went down the steps of the City Hall, and we took him out to the Lake Michigan where he could see where the boats would be, and I tell you, he was just so excited, and he said, "Is that what I think it is?" I said, "Yeah, that's the skyline of Chicago." He said, "Oh, great," and he was just so excited, and, he was going to do something that would come across the water from Chicago. I forget what those kind of boats are called. Mm-hmm. And made a lot of promises. And so that's why the state gave him the second license.
So that did go through, right?
He
got it along with the other.
Right, he got it right. And I can remember when we had our first sail-out cruise, and he came, and he had Marla Maples with him, okay? And so he ran into me, and he said, he introduced me to her, and he said, this is the young lady that didn't want me to have a license. I said, no, that wasn't it. I mean, we had somebody else, but I didn't even try to explain it to him, so.
What was he like? I mean, you said he was excited.
No, he was jumping up and down. I asked the guy with him, I said, why is he so excited? So he said, well, people don't realize that Donald Trump is a land developer. And and I don't know what it was. I think when he sold his license to Don Barton, I think he was trying to get rid of some assets because of some bankruptcies or something, but he never really lived up to the expectations, that we had, because he talked about this hotel he was going to build, and doesn't compare to hardly a day's end, So,
why do you think it didn't come to fruition?
I think like I said, at that time, what he was trying to do is, I guess, file bankruptcy and get rid of some assets. Mm-hmm. And this was one of the assets I think that he was willing to get rid of.
So it never then had the chance to kind of build up like you were hoping.
Right.
Everyone was hoping.
Yeah. And so Don Barton, he wound up with both licenses, and he he was spreading himself too thin because he went up to Pittsburgh or somewhere, and he was trying to open up there, and then he went into bankruptcy or something, and I think it was all the stress and all of that. He died, and so we have been kind of limping along, but what happened was all of our clientele comes from Chicago. And so the first, although it was us that led the charge and all of that, and we were given 2 licenses for what we had done. We didn't even have to have a referendum in Gary because we had a non-binding one, so we didn't have to have a referendum. And then we were given first shot at being first in the water. They set a date ahead that nobody could start until we had, started. And so the state in every way was trying to, say thank you for your efforts. And so all of these things. So then Hammond passed it, and East Chicago passed it, and they're closer to Chicago. And so most people, they would go to Hammond, and then we're third in line. Not only that, it used to be the boats could only dock once an hour, but since we had, so they would do like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock like that, but since we had 2 boats, Trump would do like 7:30, 8:30, and Don would be, so ours was really every half hour. People not wanting to wait would come there, but then they passed a law that said, so
yeah.
So we've got kind of the short end of the stick on that. So.
Well, I want to ask a question, and I don't really know the story behind this.
Okay.
But I heard rumor that you have probably one of the only apology letters from Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I need to find that letter too.
What's the story behind that?
Well, I'm trying to think of it was his attorney that there was an article, I think, in the paper where it seemed as though the 2 of us, and we did have a difference in terms of something, and it was Donald Trump, it was on Donald Trump's letterhead, but it was from his organization that apologized for, what was written in the paper and stuff, So it's somewhere here. I've got to find it because it has a lot of meaning now.
I'd say so.
On the casinos, I've got these collapsible poles. I've got everything. I've got every vote that was taken. I've got newspaper articles. I've got letters back and forth, and Don Barton and I, we got to be extremely close because we shared the same birthday, December 20th. And, I can remember one time when I went out to the boat and we were talking, and I asked him, I said, what are you trying to do? You're just spreading yourself so thin. I mean, we had that kind of a relationship. And because rather than put his money into the property, he was getting property other places, Mississippi, Pittsburgh, and Ameristar, they were putting money into property, and then when I think it was Caesars that got the Hammond, because it was so interesting that once we got this all passed, I can remember with Circus, we thought they would be good to come to Gary, but then they responded that Gary didn't have a family life atmosphere, and they wouldn't come to Gary, And so not only did we, although we had fought this battle, there were some companies that were interested in other places and not ours, So, yeah.
So that was a struggle getting.
Right, yeah.
People.
Right, yeah.
Obviously, decades have passed sort of since this first came to fruition. What do you think have been the results?
Well, I mean, we certainly there has, I don't know the millions of dollars. I did know the millions of dollars that the casinos bring in, to the state. Money goes to the state, and then money goes to the city where the boats are docked. It goes to the counties where the boats are docked. And there's another, I think it's technology or some kind of educational component to it. So I think, in terms of the dollars that have come into the state, I think that they have more than aided and assisted us, Sometimes I smile because my biggest opponent trying to get that passed was Evan Bayh. Okay. And I remember how we and Gary had worked so hard to try to get him elected governor, and had done that. And then here he is, in opposition. And I can remember the day that, because we put the legislation in the budget, mm-hmm. And I can remember the day that we were to vote on it. Everybody from his administration came down and was trying to keep us from voting against it. Okay. And I can remember Stan Jones. He and I had been partners in education for so many years since I'd been down there. Stan came and said the governor said he wants you to vote no on that. In fact, the governor wants to see you. And I said, you tell the governor I'm too busy counting votes, I can't come see him. And I didn't go. Rose Antich, who was supporting it, she came back and she was close to tears. I guess he was really hammering Democrats to be against it, But so I call us, there were 7 Democrats. I call us the Magnificent Seven. The Magnificent Seven voted for that. And of course the Republicans voted for it.
For the gaming legislation.
That was in the budget.
In the budget.
It was in the budget, right. And so I smiled when they were thinking about him running for president. And he was saying that, they were saying about Evan, running for president, that one of the few governors in the country that had not had a raise in taxes. And I said to myself, yeah, that's because we got the casinos.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, do I understand there was some pushback from some of the Democrats, particularly in Gary, then when he was up for re-election, because of his pushing back against the casinos?
Yeah, I'm sure there was. I didn't use that as an excuse. Once you win, why do that? But yeah, there's some people who still to this day in Gary who have not forgiven him. Mm-hmm. When he came and ran for, what did he run for lately? The Senate? No. Yeah.
Probably.
U.S. Senate or something?
Maybe.
I forget. But his latest election
mm-hmm.
try, there were people in Gary who still remembered that, his mm-hmm. position on that, So.
Okay. Well, I meant to ask this earlier, but what prompted you to switch from the House to the Senate?
Well, it was, it was that Adam Benjamin died, and so it was open. And, to be perfectly honest, what I didn't like most about being a representative was running every 2 years. So it gave me the opportunity to have to campaign less and for every 4 years. And I thought it was interesting that I thought I could go over to the Senate and continue to work on the casino bill. And it would be like the first time in the history of the state where the author of the bill was also the sponsor of the bill. And so I thought maybe I could go over there and work over there. And of course I knew Charlie Brown would continue the work in the House. And so, he was up to go over there too. And so I just decided, once every 4 years. I mean, I couldn't pass that opportunity up. So.
Were there any differences between being in one versus the other that you liked or didn't like?
Well, you've heard what they say, right? The House is like a tavern and the Senate is like a library. That's not quite true, but I do think that the Senate is I think they deliberate more, and in the House, I always got the impression that since there were so many of us in the House, everybody was trying to stand out. You know what I mean? And I remember one time Dellinger stood on the desk to get the attention of the speaker, and Dick Dellinger, right? I just thought about that again, and the Senate was a little bit more deliberative, and and so that was my views then, as to why I decided to go there. But mainly it was just not having to run every 2 years, so which is important.
Obviously, you said the casinos were some of the most controversial legislation. Is there anything else that sticks out to you?
Well, the juveniles and the death penalty was one, because it came, on the heels of the Paula Cooper case here in Gary, where these teenagers had stabbed the Bible teacher. And so I tried to not let that get into it at all, but once, because it was Dick Bray who was chair of the committee where the bill was heard. And so he said, Earline, I'll let you have a hearing, but I'm not too sure we're going to vote on it. So I said, okay. And there was a guy from Cleveland State University that was like the expert on all of this. I didn't even know he was coming. He came and made such an excellent presentation until Dick turned to me and he says, Earline, we're going to take a vote on this one, And then we voted. Got out of committee, got out of the House, went over to the Senate to, what's the congressman's name that was in the Senate at that time?
Barron Hill or somebody like that?
No, not Barron. Wow. I forget his name.
What year was this around?
I don't remember what year it was. But anyway, he left the Senate and went to Washington.
Oh,
okay. So when it went over there, I can remember Frank Moran from Hammond, because I went over there to listen to the bill, and he was against it, and he was back talking about the Paula Cooper case. And he got up in front and he said, and she stabbed him, and she stabbed her, and she stabbed her, and I mean, going through all these machinations, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, you're going to kill this bill. But it passed out. Bob Hellman was there at the time, and he aided and assisted, you know, its passage. And it passed because all along I knew that Paula Cooper would be negative, you know. But I remember one time I was walking down the hall and Randy Shepard said to me, he says, you do know that you were responsible for saving Paula Cooper's life. Because when we passed that legislation, it was like, it was, you know, it was, what it basically said is that no death penalty, you know, for up to 16, and then you could use 16 to 18 as a mitigating factor, you know. And so although she had been like, they were getting ready to sentence her, that they didn't. And but then I was so sorry when I found out she had committed suicide. I can remember my son lives in Arizona, and I was just gotten off the plane, was going into his house, and a reporter called me from back here to let me know that Paula had committed suicide. And interestingly enough, her sister contacted me a couple of years ago. Her sister is doing a book, and so her sister came over and visited with me, and I keep a picture of Paula, you know, on my stand over there, you know. So it, I don't know, and because people ask me, you know, I never met Paula Cooper. And then I was thinking to myself, you know, wonder is there anything I'd have said or done that could have prevented her from committing suicide, you know. But I guess not. Her sister and I have basically become like friends. We're Facebook friends, and she kind of runs things by me when, you know, what she's getting ready to do. They still haven't written a book, but they're going to do a book about that whole, you know, Paula Cooper's, you know, episode and stuff, you know.
Well, how did that legislation come to you? I mean, I know that the incident took place in Gary. Is that something you picked up, or is that something that someone said, look, this is...
No, I picked it up. You know, I was upset that they were going to give her the death penalty. Because like I said, people don't understand the kind of homes that these kids come from and what happens, and, you know, and just like now, the Chicago kids that are here, once they close down those high-rises in Chicago, we've got a large population of Chicago kids that are here. And my sister is still teaching. And she, when she comes home and tells me some of the things that those kids say to her, and she's an intervention specialist, you know, and so she works with kindergartners and first graders. And, you know, the other day she said, the little boy said, you know, shut up, fat ass, you know, calling her names. And the parents come over, you know, and there have been parents coming over to fight the teachers. And you know, Peggy Hinckley, I'm working with her here. The mayor appointed me to be on the advisory board for fiscal management, and I was elected chairperson of that, you know, and so I'm working closely with Peggy. But people don't understand the children that we have to work with here in Gary, you know, and the homes from which they come, and the difficulty that's there. And so, I don't know. I don't know what you do with kids like that, and they're kids that I never experienced this. They say they're a group of kids they're called runners, and that they have to get up and run, you know, and they'll run out to school, and you know they have to catch them. You know, I never even heard the term runners when talking to about a group of kids, you know, but it's I don't know where we're going to go in Gary, you know, how we can stem some of the problems that are here, you know, the violence, and so my son keeps trying to get me to come to Arizona. I'm like, he said, Mom, you don't know what it is to wake up every day and the sun is shining. I said, yeah, okay. But he and his wife, they teach at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, so they're doing just fine, you know. Yeah. I got 5 grandsons.
Oh, man.
1 granddaughter, and they're all in that area, but you know.
Hard to leave.
It's hard to leave, that's right, yeah. Right, yeah, so, but anyway.
Well, what was your proudest moment as a legislator?
My proudest moment as a legislator, I think it was the passage of the casino bill, you know. I've got a picture somewhere of me going over to Johnny Nugent's desk, you know, because he made the greatest speech that night. You know, Johnny Nugent didn't talk very much, but I tell you, he made a great speech that night. And I can remember going over to his desk afterwards and saying, you know, thanks a lot, you know, we did it, you know. And so all you could do is to do what you think will make a difference. And I was so glad that we had done that. It has not made the difference that I had thought it would make, but we really haven't been the recipients of what I thought we were going to get as a result of it passing, you know. I mean, who would have thought that, you know, it would be Hammond. Hammond does extremely well. They are really moving forward, you know, in East Chicago. And we do too. I mean, some of the money we've used, we've employed people. Most of the people that work there, you know, are from Gary, so we've got employment there, and, you know, and so it's doing fine, but it would have been so much better if those 2 cities hadn't been there and they were coming straight, you know, to Gary, you know. And and then Michigan City, they were the last to get on board, and so all of the traffic that would have been coming, you know, from the north, we would have gotten. But so Michigan City there, and then those 3 casinos there, you know, and so maybe if we get a chance to move out to 8094 where all that traffic is, you know, then we can begin to do some of the things that we still need to do here in Gary. So, but anyway. So I've still got my hands into working with, you know, the emergency manager here and trying to see what we need to do here as far as education is concerned, and still working, you know, to try and get additional monies, you know, for the city to solve some of our problems, so, but in a different capacity, you know. It was the commute back and forth that is the reason why I decided not to run again, you know. I mean, people thought I had a driver, you know, but I was driving back and forth, and, you know, the advent of cell phones and all that, you know, I mean, just to me, it was a little more hazardous than what I, you know, wanted to do. And so, and then I thought that this would be my time for my husband and I, you know, to do some things. And then he he, as you can tell, he's not well. He's not ambulatory, and he he has cancer, and so we're not going to be able to do a lot of the things that we thought we would be able to do, and so right now, it's back and forth to the cancer doctor and stuff, so, but anyway, I'm glad I did the legislature. I mean, I felt that I have been able to contribute, and I think I was a little late leaving, but I've still got some time, here to continue to do some things, and, I will continue to do that. So.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite anecdotes or stories from your time in the legislature? Or do you have too many that you can't choose?
I'm trying to think. I don't know. I think I probably shared everything that
I just have a
high
couple.
points.
Yeah. I just have a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
One, I just wondered, and you've addressed this at a couple of different moments, but did you ever feel that you were treated a particular way based on either your race or your gender when you were a legislator?
Maybe initially, but I think it's the way in which you carry yourself, and I never felt different, and so I think by my not feeling different, I don't think I acted different, and I think people, I guess nobody ever really forgets, that you're a woman or what your race is. But I do think that there are ways that you yourself can behave in such a manner that people take that into consideration. Okay. So I don't think that I did behave in that manner because I never felt, I'm surrounded by people of a different political party, but I never felt in any way not being able to get involved in what was going on. African American, sometimes I think it's an advantage because people have low expectations of you, so then when you do okay, then you're considered a genius. And then I think, being a woman, I've always competed against guys and my brothers. I was the only girl brought up between three boys, and I'm steady trying to get my dad's attention. And so, I've been able to succeed in the quote-unquote man's world, so I have just kind of put the fact that I'm a woman, the fact that I'm a black, the fact that I might be of a different party, I just never take those things into consideration, and I think that, in the end, it bodes well for what you have to get done. So.
How has the state of Indiana changed over the course of your lifetime? I don't know whether or not, I think I could have said something different maybe a couple of years ago than I do now, because of all the things that are going on in the country at this point in time, but I had thought that Indiana and racism and all of that was
ebbing, okay? Because I was Barack Obama's first district coordinator when he ran in 2008. And we carried Indiana, you know, and so that kind of led me to believe that we are at a different point here than we were when I first got into politics, you know. So, like I said, I thought that maybe race did not play as significant a role because of the Obama situation, but now that, you know, different, now in this atmosphere, I'm not too sure whether I viewed that right or whether or not actually things have gone back the other way, you know, so we'll see. Yeah, it's kind of scary.
Very scary.
Yeah, right.
Given that you had previous contact with the president, I guess has his involvement in politics surprised you from your earlier interactions or not?
Yes, yeah, it is surprising for me. I didn't realize that he was so crass. You know what I mean? I guess I probably maybe should have wondered about his maybe sincerity in terms of some of the things that he promised and didn't deliver on. Say, for example, when we had a hotel downtown that we had to close up, and it was right next to City Hall. And as we were going down the steps to get into the van to go out to the lake, Donald Trump said, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, that's an old hotel there." And he said, "That's the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get rid of that hotel. We're gonna level that, you know." He never did that. I don't even know whether he ever thought about it again. We finally got it leveled, you know, because it was an eyesore to walk down to City Hall and see this abandoned Sheraton Hotel sitting there, you know. And but, you know.
Yeah. You've addressed this a little bit, but how has the General Assembly changed during your 30 plus years in service?
You know, like I said, when I left there, I didn't see nearly the. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I was blind to it, but I didn't see the hard political lines that were there when I first, came to the legislature. I mean, they were there and they were visible, not like they are today, but they were there. But I always thought, or maybe it was my shift from the House to the Senate, but, we got along fine in the Senate. I mean, say, for example, I was the ranking member for our party on the Education Committee. Dennis Cruz. Now, Dennis Cruz homeschooled his children, probably, would be the exact opposite of where I was on the education issues. But Dennis Cruz invited me to partner with him till the day before every education committee meeting. We would meet with legislative services. The attorneys would come in, meet with us, go through the bills, so we understood the bills, okay? And, and I would say to Dennis, well, that's something I can't support. And he said, I understand that. Well, I'm going to be here on this. And so, we did that. And so it wasn't, when we met as a committee, it was he did his thing, I did my thing. He said, and it was no rancor or any of that, So, and I don't know whether that continued or not, but I always thought very highly of him for doing that, because we didn't want, for education, we didn't want to be negative and all of that. I can remember one time Ryan Mishler, okay, he was testifying before the education committee on a bill or something. I forget, but one of the things I said to him is, I'd like to invite you to Gary to visit our schools. And so he said, who's going to protect me? So a hush went over the room, okay. I didn't say anything, I just went on. And so he came to me later, he apologized, and he came to Gary. And the superintendent and I took him around, so that he could see the schools and stuff, So like I said, it was that kind of atmosphere I thought we had in the Senate. I'm not too sure whether or not they weren't still, running every 2 years. You got to be more political, than you are in the Senate, where you only have to run every 4 years, so you can. And so I think they get into more maybe political stuff than we did in the Senate. But I enjoyed the Senate a lot, So.
Well, my final question then is, especially since you've traveled all over the state and served for so long, what, if any, enduring qualities do you think Hoosiers have or hold dear? Or are there any?
Well, there's a certain, I think, integrity to Hoosiers. I think what you see is what you get. There is no pretense, no hiding, and even though you may have differences, I think that there is an honest portrayal of what you see is what it really is. And so it's that integrity and that honesty, I think, that differs us, from other states, It may not be what you like, it may not be you want, but it is what it is. And when it is what it is, and there's that honesty and integrity there, then to me, it's fair. And it helps you and enables you to see a way to maybe change things. Whereas if you weren't getting the right picture, then you might be going down the wrong road. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, right, yeah. So I'm Illinois. I'm next to Chicago, so we see the news from Illinois all the time, and that's not what's there. Maybe that's why. I can see the big difference that's there. A Hoosier, they'll tell you where they are, and that's where they are. Like it, or not, and there's no. You don't have to dig deep or any of that. It is what it is, which is, to me, is fair. I think what is not fair is when the people hide, and you don't know where to maybe alleviate any problems and all of that. So,
sure.
So.
Well, I could probably talk to you for about 10 hours. You have fascinating stories, but I'm very cognizant of your time. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you want to get on the record, or anything that you feel like we haven't gone over?
Nope. No, just that I absolutely loved the process. I do, and and I just am so thankful that I was able to be in a position to do what I did, and I'm having a hard time going back to normal life. You know, I was reading in the paper about this teacher at a Catholic school here who's been teaching for 50 years. I could have done this, you know, and I keep asking myself, you know, gee, Early, you could have got a chauffeur, or you could have, you know.
Yeah.
But I miss it. And you know, when I talk about my state house family, you know, it was my family, you know, and so the separation has not been easy for me, but it gets better every day, you know, and so
Well, when
and
you were
I
there
know
for so long, I mean,
yeah,
it's
right,
been a
yeah,
part of your life.
right, absolutely, yep. So, but like I said, I still, you know, keep in contact with them from time to time, you know, some of them, and Clinker and I, we're still good buddies. I guess she's Earline, because Charlie decided not to run. He said, Earline, why don't you run? And Charlie, brother, I said, are you kidding? You think I'm going to start all over again? Well, we watched our children grow up together, you know, and so, and then her husband and my husband, you know, former athletes, and I know Vic has had some health challenges too, you know, so.
Yeah.
So there are associations that you make there that impact. So,
Sure.
anyway. Well, I've probably talked too
No,
much.
it was really great. I very much enjoyed it, and thank you so much for
you're welcome.
agreeing to do this
yeah,
and for taking the time.
Okay.
And I'll just hand this sheet back to you here.
Okay.
And if you're okay with it, if you just want to check no restrictions and
Okay.
sign up here, but if there's anything
Okay, no restrictions.
that you know want to close off, I'm happy to do that too.
No, that's.
And I'll go ahead and turn the recorder off here.